You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button. We talk about Pro Football Focus here pretty often, and I tell you always, I give the caveat with Pro Football Focus that it is a metric to use, but is not necessarily the metric. It's not the be-all, end-all. It's just something to consider when you're taking into account a game and how teams played. So after a game, if you're not familiar, the analysts at Pro Football Focus go and they grade every player. Every player at every position, they give them a grade for the game. And I asked our guy Hunt Palmer over at LouisianaSports.net to start doing this on Mondays after LSU games to put out the Pro Football Focus grades. The top 5 players from LSU and the bottom 5 players from LSU. By the way, this is free. As always, our content over at LouisianaSports.net is totally free. We'll never have a paywall. We'll never be a subscription. We're just going to do good content and give it to you for free and hope that we have great advertisers that want to come aboard with us. Plug. Those opportunities are there as well. If you own a business, you want to support LouisianaSports.net, we'd love to talk to you. And I think the Pro Football Focus grades were actually really representative of what we think this game was. The top 5 on Pro Football Focus from bottom to top. So the 5th highest graded player was Gabe Relaford. 4th highest graded player was Greg Penn. The 3rd highest graded player was Garrett Nussmeier. 2nd highest graded player, Braden Swinson. The highest graded player for LSU was Zy Alexander. Very telling. Brian Kelly talked about it after the game. Thought he did in the postgame. Brian Kelly singled out Zy Alexander. So Zy Alexander, Braden Swinson, Garrett Nussmeier, Greg Penn, Gabe Relaford. Your top 5 players, according to Pro Football Focus, 4 of them were defensive players. The offensive guy was your quarterback who threw 6 touchdowns. Had a pretty good day. My takeaways here are, I think some of them are pretty obvious. Number 1, Zy Alexander, and this has been my contention since the spring. Your best look in the secondary. So if Zy Alexander's healthy, Ashton Stamps is the other corner, although caveat, that may be P.J. Woodland, who is ascending. P.J. was very good the other day. And you can move Sage Ryan to safety. That is Sage Ryan's natural position. As a matter of fact, on Monday, Brian Kelly effectively acknowledged that.
I think that's where he can help us the best. Look, he's a very versatile player for us, but I think that's where he fits right now for us. You know, we've really focused in now with Alexander playing at the level he has. I think it just makes sense for us to keep him at the safety position.
With Alexander playing at the level he is, it makes the most sense for us to keep Sage at safety. Listen, I'm not a football savant, but Sage Ryan was a 5-star coming out of high school. A lot of LSU fans have bemoaned him. My contention has always been you should celebrate Sage Ryan. Sage Ryan is a safety. In his entire career, he's never gotten to play safety. He signed as a 5-star safety. Had a hamstring injury, missed most of his freshman season. He has played nickel. He has played boundary corner. He has played everything but his best position, which is safety. Because LSU's had awful defenses, and he has tried to do the thing he could do to be impactful in some way. Now, 2 years ago, of course, you had veteran safeties. You had Greg Brooks and Joe Fouché, and you were good at safety, and you didn't need Sage Ryan back there. So he tried to help you at nickel. Last year, you were awful everywhere, and so he was your best corner until Zy Alexander obviously emerged. If you can play Sage Ryan at safety with Jordan Gilbert, and Zy Alexander's healthy, and Stamps, Woodland, some combination can be your corners, and Jair Brown at nickel, that is your best secondary. So yes, I am very excited about Zy Alexander getting healthier, playing corner, so you can let Sage Ryan go do the thing he's meant to do naturally. And I suspect that when he plays safety, you're going to see a much better version of Sage Ryan. So Zy Alexander, your highest rated player from Pro Football Focus. The bottom 5, I think, is also very, very telling. The 5th lowest rated player was JVR Suggs. Ashton Stamps, Caleb Jackson, Shelton Sampson, and the lowest rated player was Harold Perkins. In the spring when LSU made the decision to move Perkins back to off-ball linebacker, I made the comment that all of you made. I think this is sort of a unanimously held opinion. Harold Perkins is this elite level edge player. And it's not something we're guessing. It's not something we're basing on high school star ratings. We saw it, right? We saw it with our eyes when he was a freshman. He took over against Ole Miss. He, as a freshman, took over against Arkansas. Harold Perkins was a spy as a freshman on Bryce Young. Harold Perkins is a dominant athlete in space. That is not an opinion. That is objective fact. That's why he's a first-round projected pick on draft boards. It's why he was a freshman All-America. It's why he's all these things we all think he can be, because we've seen it with our eyes. And for 2 years now, they've tried to make him an off-ball linebacker, and he is not an off-ball linebacker. I was willing to take this leap of faith because I have people that I really trust, like Derry Beckwith, who was a first-team All-SEC linebacker, a national champion, who came on the show and said, Harold can do it. It's just a matter of getting comfortable and learning reps. Derry talked through his first practice at LSU and how his head was on a swivel and it was just warp speed and it had to slow down, and once it did, he was great. And Blake Baker in the spring talked about it as well, about how he believes Harold Perkins has the physical ability to do it. Now it's just reps to get comfortable. But it's so obvious you are neutralizing a guy that could be an otherwise massively impactful player for your defense, maybe the most impactful player on your defense, and you are neutralizing him by putting him in a spot where he is not comfortable or productive. And I don't know how much more we have to see of this. Ultimately, I think it's Harold Perkins' decision. We live in an NIL world, a transfer portal era world, and if Harold Perkins wants to be an off-ball linebacker to try to show NFL scouts he can be a three-down linebacker, and your choice is, do we let Harold Perkins do this or we lose him in the portal? I understand why you're letting him try. LSU did this more than a decade ago with Russell Shepard. He was a dynamic quarterback, a five-star number one. He comes to LSU. You promise him you give him a shot to be a quarterback. It was so evident day freaking one that I went to practice and watched Russell Shepard stand next to Jordan Jefferson and Jarrett Lee, and they were all throwing passes, and it was like, boom, 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 boom. You're like, oh, that's never going to play in the SEC. Day one, it was obvious. But you promised him you'd give him a shot, and then ultimately you moved him. They're doing the same thing right now with Harold Perkins. You are neutralizing a dynamic player because your inability to just say, this isn't the thing you do well. Let us put you in a position to best help yourself and this defense. I don't know if they will, but I would sure love to see them try to figure that out over these next 3 games, in particular on Saturday, because you're going on the road against a bad offense, and then you're home against UCLA, home against South Alabama, 2 winnable games before you have an open date, you play Ole Miss. And boy, I would love to see Harold Perkins look like Harold Perkins when Ole Miss comes back in here, because that was 2 years ago the game where he had his coming out party. Lane Kiffin said it point blank in the postgame. The game changed when they put 40 on the field. Well, 40 has become 4, now he's 7. And you would love to see him look more like 40 again. And that ain't going to be an off-ball linebacker. It's hard to look at, but it's also, it confirms a lot of what you and I and everybody sees. You don't have to understand X's and O's in defensive schemes to understand Harold Perkins was the most feared player on the defense, the guy you had to account for, and now has become kind of invisible. He's a lost guy on the interior of that defense. See what they elect to do. The other players, by the way, on that bottom 5, Shelton Sampson is number 2 on that list. You desperately miss Chris Hilton. You have to have your game breaker. Kyle Parker was injured. Shelton Sampson didn't have a catch. You got to have someone that can stretch a defense. You need Chris Hilton back. And then Caleb Jackson at 3. I mean, Caleb Jackson is a guy that I thought would be the guy coming into this year that nobody knew his name, but everyone in the SEC by the end of the season would know Caleb Jackson's name. Through 2 games, he doesn't even have 50 rushing yards combined through 2 games. I would not have thought that in any way. 14 rushes, 33 yards, an average of 2.4 for Caleb Jackson. Would have never seen that. Would have never predicted that. Got to find a way to get him going. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.